Hi, everyone. Welcome to Black Fashion History. We are the podcast that celebrates the contributions of Black people across the diaspora to the fashion industry. And today we have a really exciting conversation. I am very excited to talk to Beatrice from Fashion Africa Now and just get into her background and talk a little bit about, fashion on the continent of Africa, why it's so important to celebrate and to support designers in Africa as well as decolonizing fashion. So welcome to the show, Beatrice. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you. And I'm very, very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. I've actually been following the platform for a little while because, of course, I love to focus on all things Black when it comes to fashion. But so not just Black American fashion, but fashion amongst Black people around the world. I am also from Africa. I'm from Liberia. So anywhere there's a platform that's supporting people and designers on the continent, I'm here for it. I'm celebrating. So I would love if you could just start off and kind of introduce yourself and share with the audience a little bit about you and the platform for those who may not be familiar.
Yeah, all right. So I'm Beatrice Oola, the founder of Fashion Africa Now. And I basically started this platform because I'm a kid of the diaspora, being raised between Kampala basically between Uganda and Germany. I just realized there's a lack, there's a misrepresentation, and we have such a diverse culture, what is just so amazing. And I just wanted to participate in basically giving access to designers, to an audience that isn't aware of this vibrant creativity on one hand, but then also to celebrate our culture. And for me, it was important to shape the narrative, to definitely distinguish what we find is an aesthetic, what is, our kind of taste, and not again something what is coming from an Western perspective. So I basically, started out because it was missing, and I just love showing our culture.
Beautiful. So how would you say that your own heritage growing up as a Ugandan and then also growing up in Europe influenced your perspective on African fashion?
It's a great question because being socialized in one hand in Germany and knowing my heritage, my Ugandan heritage, it has been somehow challenging because what you have been taught in school or wherever, what is beautiful is not what is actually coming from the African continent. So growing up, there was always this kind of feeling, how come, why, questioning, wondering. And of course, when I was younger, I was really not comfortable in wearing African attires those days and African hairstyles because it was something what was not considered beautiful, wasn't considered as something cool. But realizing what it actually meant by changing the narrative and actually being proud of it and wearing it the way I want and mixing it, combining it actually also helped me. And also the fact that I was able to travel back and forth and realizing that this is me, it's a mix. And so therefore the confidence I gained by growing up, by, meeting other people who are in this space, who are experiencing the same, who are feeling like this is me and I want to embrace it, actually helped me to navigate it. And then also to see that what we are also again taught, what is African, like the ethno fashion. This is what the perception has been. And I'm like, no, but African fashion is something you can't compare to ethno fashion. So when that movement kicked off and I realized, okay, we have a kind of narrative now, what we're pushing forward, I was just like in my space. And the fact that it was a movement, isn't it? It was like kicking off. And I mean, it has been there before. I mean, in the 60s, 70s, we had designers of African descent in Paris and in different European countries. But some of them were visible, but it was not really kicking off as this is a design. And therefore, when I started nearly yeah, 14 years ago, meeting other people were like finding the family and just taking over.
No, I think it's so interesting that like African fashion is sort of stigmatized, like not only in Europe, but in the States as well. And then it's put into a specific box and not really celebrated by like mainstream fashion. But then at the same time, it's what we considered like mainstream fashion is heavily influenced by like traditional, textiles and craftsmanship and all of that other stuff. And that's kind of the story that we see, a lot of times with our heritage and our work. It's like when we are producing these things, it's criticized or it's not celebrated, but it's so heavily influencing and moving the mainstream. So I think it's very important, the work that you do and, other people like you in this space to making sure that it's getting the recognition that it deserves and also celebrating and elaborating and making sure that African fashion isn't just like sitting inside of a box.
Absolutely. And I think where we're standing at the moment, because African fashion is a word, and as you said, it's put into the box. But I think because we do not yet have like a formal kind of definition, because ethno fashion, if we look into that, we know what it is, and it needs to definitely be separated from African fashion. And I think the fact that it's now happening to also study African fashion, since I'm also a lecturer and I teach around African fashion as well. And once this is really put into place, I think also the idea of what African fashion is or is not will somehow occur. So it's a process. It's a kind of process we're in. And the fact that actually the hip hop culture was before this, what we're having right now, the African fashion, and it's all built up on, and as you said, yeah, it's basically Black culture, what has influenced this international fashion industry.
So, how would you define African fashion? Because you said there isn't really a definition at the moment. So, if you had to give a definition, what would that be?
I think African fashion is definitely coming out of the cultures. It's a contemporary style, um, connected to its heritage, driven by a creativity coming out of Black culture. It's kind of at this stage where we are not easy to really find a term of what African fashion is, because it's so vibrant and it's so diverse. But what I would say, it's definitely a movement coming out of Africa and the diaspora. It's driven by the experience, by the imagination of the diaspora and creatives out of Africa. It's something what we haven't seen in this kind of style before. So it's, yeah, breaking stereotypes and changing the narrative. So this is what I can somehow define it.
Can you share with me, what does that mean in this industry when you say breaking stereotypes and changing narratives? And kind of just also go through a little bit of the challenges that you may face during that as it relates to, Africans fashion specifically.
Yeah, this is a great question. Thank you for that. So I think it means really challenging this fashion system, challenging the fashion industry in a way, since we know there are certain norms and aesthetics around. And when I say with breaking stereotypes, changing the narratives, we are basically showcasing something what is not expected, or what they, with they, I mean a Western perspective, believes is African. So basically, yeah, creating a new narrative by deciding the criterias, by selecting, by approving with what we see and identify. So it's basically and that hasn't been to embrace, that hasn't been able to be out there the way it is, by always being again formed and shaped through a Western perspective. And I think it's the Afrocentric, Afro-diasporic imagination, the way we rethink, reimagine, the way we tell our stories. So this is a kind of way to confront the system by allowing this kind of styles and also the way we consume, how we consume, to be out there.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, like, being in the United States, much of what we get in terms of like the images of Africa and then fashion, specifically the images of African fashion, it's never told from our own perspectives. It's always filtered through, like you said, a Western perspective or somebody else, making sharing those narratives. And we never really get a chance to see each other in the diaspora, but like from our own lens. So having a platform like Fashion Africa now really provide the space for designers and African professionals, fashion professionals on the continent to really just push the narrative themselves and tell their own story, not what others think African fashion is or what others think it should be, but really kind of share their own stories and then interweave it with all of the different, experiences and things that we grow up with is very beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and also owning it, because this is I think what is so important,
Right.
especially also, for us that we own it. This is now our story, our identity, and it's not again given. It's not again a stigmata. It's not again something what was, yeah, created for us. It's us, coming from us, by us, for us. And I think, yeah, this is
Exactly.
this day so important because of course you have magazines, international magazines, who are also writing about African fashion, who are now also highlighting different brands. But I think it's still a difference if you have really perspectives from their lived experience and being in the scene instead of again someone who maybe knows fashion and writes about fashion. So these are different perspectives and a different way how you
Exactly.
really feel the fashion you actually want to belong to. So it's also about belonging on one hand.
And then I think a lot of times African fashion is written from a perspective of like, oh, this is this new novel exotic trend, and like, oh, let's wear African fashion for this moment and celebrate it for this moment, and then the next season we move on to the next thing. So I think it's also important, to share that this is a mainstay. Like, people have been doing this for years. The heritage influences a lot of what contemporary designers are doing here today. And it's not just a seasonal thing or one moment or a trend. Like, these are people's lived experiences and that's what they're creating out of. And it's important to elevate and celebrate that, consistently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is the thing. And what is also so interesting, some understand also African fashion when they use again typical accessories, what they identify with it, and even not designed by an African designer or a designer of the diaspora. This is
Right.
what we see here in Europe very often in magazines, where I'm like, at this level, 2024, 2023, really? And this is, the
Exactly.
narrative where I'm like, no, this shouldn't be, but it's still happening.
Exactly. And that's a great segue into my next question because you talk a lot about decolonizing fashion. So, can you share like what are some of the like key steps that we all should take when we want to accomplish decolonizing fashion so that our stories are told from our perspectives and we don't have cases where you have non-African designers participating in benefiting off of African fashion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the word itself is already challenging, but yes, I like to talk about decolonize fashion or deconstruct fashion. And it's a process. It's a process where we just need to understand still colonial practice, colonial continuities, that are still happening and still shape the fashion industry. And this one needs to be critically questioned. Like, for example, beauty standards, colorism, featureism, texturism. This is what we still see in this fashion industry. And it needs to be questioned in different or on different levels, either also on an institutional, economical, social level, cultural appropriation. Who is again deciding what is beautiful, what is not beautiful? So, actually, if we look at it, it means really shifting power away from the Western perspective. That is what really it needs to happen. It needs to be tracked down to questioning how is the institution built up? Who is teaching fashion? Where are they getting their knowledge from? What kind of knowledge productions are we using? If we look into economics, who are the fashion managers? Who are the fashion workers? Where is actually the resource coming from? Who's benefiting from it? If we also look at a social perspective, like overconsumption, why are we not talking about it? What does waste colonism mean? How come we can
Hmm.
consume and we don't care what is happening in the global south? So I think this is something what is so important where we should all talk about decolonized fashion. And it's of course something what is gets at a certain point uncomfortable for companies, but the wealth that has been made with black labor is insane. And that is something what we really need to
Absolutely.
discuss more and more, and how to also return basically, because we are here, the diaspora is here, and we all want to find out like what is the return? I mean, what happened? Colonism, the transatlantic slave, of course, we can't pay something that will recover it or something. But I think at this level where we are, it's like, okay, how can we still actually benefit, or what step needs this industry to take so we can somehow meet in a solidaric environment? And this is, I think, what is really not yet happening. We have diversity now, inclusion, representation. This is now a tool what is used, but it's a beginning.
Yeah, I definitely agree. A lot of people use like inclusion and diversity as like buzzwords when there really isn't any action behind that. But I think it's so interesting that for a lot of those things, it's been on the backs of the Black professionals to try to decolonize or to create diversity and equity and inclusion when really it should be the other way around, because we are the ones that are being most affected by these systems. And so it's like, how do we work with the larger Western systems to make sure that we are doing some of the things that you talked about as far as like decolonizing fashion education, and experiences, and also sustainability, so that we aren't continually being affected by that. So I would love if you can share just any kind of leaps and bounds that you have seen since you've begun your work 14 years ago, as far as improvements in decolonizing fashion, or improvements around inclusivity and diversity in the
Hmm.
industry.
This is, what should I say? We're.
And if the answer is you have not seen anything, that
I
works
was I was
too.
just about to say. I said, "Wow, what can I say?" I mean, yeah. Seriously speaking, I really can't say or give an example. I can maybe just say it from this perspective. Me being here in Germany and in this space for over a decade, up to today, we still don't have a black person, for example, who is in a relevant fashion council, who is a relevant fashion manager, or in another specific professional role. So we all talk about it. I mean, access has been given here and there. One example I could say out of Germany, maybe, of what I did last year, I collaborated with a German sustainable shoe brand, and I matched the brand with a Nigerian brand with Encore, because she's really doing amazing. She's really one of the remarkable sustainable or mindful conscious brands out of Nigeria. And she invented also an own textile out of waste. She mostly uses denim.
Oh, wow.
And so we created a shoe together. And that was really something very new to the German scene, to the German sustainable fashion scene. So the first brand that really said, okay, let's deep dive and also talk about decolonized fashion. And it was a beginning. It was something that wasn't there yet in Germany. So it kicked off last year with the launch, and we produced 5,000 pair of shoes. It's a really interesting brand because they're a barefoot shoe. So for everyone who feels like, dive in, Wildling. So it was something where I was like, okay, it's happening. It's beginning in Germany. Or maybe also the fact that I'm now also lecturing in a university where, though I'm coming from a praxis side. So these are some changes where I'm like, okay, it's happening here and there. But if I look at it all round, we are at the beginning. And of course, there has been a huge exhibition, Africa Fashion Exhibition at the V&A. It was a one kind of, and thank God the curator was also a woman of color. And still, there were also kind of challenges with that kind of exhibitions. And we see it, but we still need to question more, and certain perspectives need to realize it's sometimes better to leave or to allow different perspectives visibility, room, and to allow different knowledge productions. And this is what is still missing.
So, how do you keep yourself encouraged in this work when you feel like you've seen so little strides? But, of course, you're doing great things and you're partnering with people and giving platforms to more professionals. But how do you keep yourself encouraged when it feels like I'm doing all this work and we like take two steps forward, but it doesn't seem to be pushing the
Yeah,
needle
yeah.
any?
Yeah, it needs really a lot of, how should I say, motivation and the network. I think what keeps me moving is the network, the people I interact with, the brands I get to know, the events I attend, and then also the small achievements or bigger achievements that happen along the way. If it's being able to again step into spaces where we were not before, like an exhibition I curated in a design museum a couple of years ago. It wasn't yet there. And I was like, wow, fashion, African fashion belongs into a design museum and not into an ethnological museum. So that was a win. That was something I was like, okay, great. Or also now receiving awards. This is also what shows, okay, the work you're doing, it's somehow meaningful. It's like out there and it's being recognized. So it's happening. But of course, I love what I do. This is also definitely one point. I love traveling. I love being out there because being here in the diaspora, of course, is a different experience than being in different African countries. And I'm able also
Right.
to work there. I was working in Nairobi or in Senegal, Ethiopia. So being in those spaces really allows me also to evolve and allows me to create work that I really love and bring also more to the forefront through the platform, through the online magazine, or the events I do. So that is supportive, absolutely. Otherwise, I don't know where I would be.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, I think it's important to keep yourself motivated and encouraged because it can get discouraging sometimes when you feel like you're not making strides. But I love what you said about African fashion belonging in a like a design museum. And I think that's so important to state because I have this thought where, like we look at European fashion or the world, I would say, look at that European fashion as like the pinnacle of fashion. It's like it's haute couture and, it's to be, every little thing is to be celebrated. Where I view African fashion in that way. I view African fashion as haute couture. When I think about some of the techniques and approaches and, the textiles and designs, and so I would love to hear your perspective on how African fashion should be viewed in your eyes. I can kind of tell a little bit based on the work that you do and the things that you said, but would love for you to share in your own words how we should
Mhm.
view African
Yeah.
fashion to
I mean,
you.
it African fashion should be viewed as a high end, as a premium, as quality, contemporary, and unique luxury, because these are all words when you think of it, people will not come up with. And I think the fact that the way I work, like tapping into spaces, into design museums, into this high end, allowed me also here to get get to that point where I have recognition and where it's clear that okay, this is not something we will have for a certain trend. It's gonna last. It's going to be around. This is what I've been saying from day one, and I think the fact that it has been showcased on different levels and the fact that the textiles also, it's so unique. If you have textiles from West Africa, East Africa, if you create something out of bark cloth, out of adire, it's so unique what you haven't seen, and you combine it with Western styles. So I think that is where we are now seeing African fashion, and also the fact so many in pop culture, if it's artists like Beyonce, Solange, Burna Boy, name them. I mean, they're the ones who are really like giving the fashion a picture, a standing in this industry, in this
Right.
system. And this is what is really, and then also the exhibitions in various stunning museums that we can now see globally. Books, what have been written around African fashion, what are now popping up, and platforms. So that is really the aesthetic now, where we are aware. Okay, it's not just craftsmanship; it's more than that.
Mhm.
And this is where we are still in a process, but we're getting closer.
So, in your opinion, how do we make sure that people throughout the supply chain are able to benefit from this boom in popularity when it comes to African fashion? So not just the designers get their just due, but, down to, where we get the materials and the seamstresses and all of that, how we make sure that the home countries really are benefiting from this increase in popularity that we're
Yeah.
starting to see.
I think what somehow is the missing link, I feel we need to be more connected. The diaspora in African countries, I feel we need to be more connected. If we really connect on certain levels and make sure that we are working together and creating this, what we need now, the connection, so that we know, okay, we have manufacturers, they may need these. It can be, done when certain people in the diaspora are aware of and linked up. I mean, it's already happening on a certain level. There are already connections made, but I think it needs to be more deepened, and also like fashion insiders who like have been in the diaspora, who know people in different African countries. We need more conversations, and we really need to to find a way where we can really uplift each other and create our own system. Because what is happening, you have, of course, global companies who are tapping into fashion Africa cities and trying to, again, promote their own products, trying again to find for them a new market. So, how can local brands evolve with textiles from Asia, waste colonism, and lack of resources? So, this is where I see the diaspora, where we have a kind of responsibility if we can come together and support by either also supporting platforms like Fashion Africa Now, like your platform. I think where investments should also take place is in these kind of platforms, because we are bringing the scene together, we're giving visibility, so we can also be more enabled to amplify more that can really be done on the continent. And this is where I'm like seeing some missing links. Of course, it's good to fund creatives, if it's fashion designers, fashion stylists, but also our work is so important. And it's so important to understand that, yeah, with this outreach, what we have, we can really bring so much more to the table. And resources, this is really what we need to amplify. And then, of course, knowledge, like how can we connect the dots? This is what I like to say, how can we connect them so we can get it on? Like, I know here on my end, okay, who is out there, for example, in Senegal or in Ethiopia or in Rwanda, so if someone now from the US is like, okay, I wish I could, so with this kind of connection we have, so much more can evolve. And that is what I find also so fulfilling, what we create.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree. And I love that you kind of spoke on not just, supporting designers, but other platforms. I think a lot of times when people start to think about, okay, I want to like be more inclusive, diversify fashion, whatever, it's straight like designers, let's collab with designers, let's purchase from designers, forgetting the whole entire ecosystem. I mean, they're journalists, they're researchers, they're like curators, they're so many other aspects, there are lecturers, so many other pieces of the fashion ecosystem that's as equally as important when you think about, how do we like decolonize? How do we push this narrative forward? How do we break the stereotypes? And it's important to, give weight and opportunity to each of those pieces. Cause like you said, we work together, we make the connections, we amplify the voices, and that's kind of how we, continue to move forward. So yeah, I'm very excited that you
Absolutely.
mentioned that.
Because this is what I also learned along the way, that we need to highlight ourselves, like our work. I mean, this is Black Fashion History Podcast. This is so important, and who you capture. And when people now hear, listen to it, there will be others where I will be like, hey, maybe it's interesting for you if you also interview this person or this kind of collective. And this is how we grow our own African fashion black industry, and this is
Right.
what needs to happen, because it's only us who can do it. And on the continent, there's a vibrant market that is just waiting for us. It's just waiting for us. And that's why I'm like, okay, we need to connect and need to find ways. How can we really create spaces, and so we finally benefit from it? It's now our time.
Absolutely. Okay, so I know we talked about a lot, but now I want to switch gears and just get a little bit lighter, get some fun questions in there. So, you are attending an exclusive event and you have to walk the red carpet. Tell me, what contemporary African designer are you wearing?
Ooh, I think I would be wearing, oh dear, this is a question. Tebe Magugu. Yes. Yes, South
Okay.
African designer. Yeah, I like his language, the way he also creates his pattern, the cuts. I like the silhouettes.
I think I've seen a few pieces, but I have to go back and check them
Yes.
out a little bit more. But okay, that's a good one. What is something that people will find most surprising about you?
Actually, that I have been living partly in Germany, being raised in Germany, born in Germany. So, yeah, that is really surprising.
How I've never been to Germany. So how would you describe Germany to a
Oh,
foreigner?
wow. How would I describe it? I mean, Germany is, it depends where you end up in Germany. I mean, the good thing is I'm in Hamburg in the northern
Okay.
part, and Hamburg is what I always love to say, the most beautiful city in Germany. It's very multicultural, but people are very reserved. So, Germany is kind of, yeah, serious in a way,
Okay.
strict. I find it strict in a way. Depending also where you are, more welcoming or not. Like it's a mix. It's
Okay.
really a mix. So we have yeah, this kind of vibe, I would say. But Berlin is cool. I mean, that is the only city in Germany you can really have a good time without speaking a single word German, and you can find a lot of people who do not speak a single
Okay.
word German. So that is also amazing. But yeah, so the bigger cities are definitely Berlin, Hamburg, and then Munich in the south. But depending on what you strive for, I would say between Berlin and Hamburg, you're doing the best for yourself. Once you hit Germany,
Okay. So put that on my list. I do want to visit Germany, but I want to know what I'm
yeah,
in for. So it looks like I gotta learn a few words
definitely, you know,
first.
try to say hello, wie geht's dir, how are you doing, you know, some basics. And
Okay.
I mean, but I mean, right now, actually, we are also in a kind of, how should I say, not so good light because I think you have all seen Europe is also becoming more and more right wing. So currently, Germany, we're really
Mhm.
facing a lot. So it looks like we're, I mean, it's not looking like it's right. It's a right wing. So racism is real. And there has been a statistic earlier the year, and now the former elections have showed it. So this is also something Germany has to face: structural racism, institutional racism. We need to really get to it, and that is a kind of challenge what politically and socially we are in at the moment.
I can only imagine. But the United States having its own host of problems in that area as well. So yeah, I'm
You
sure we can
know,
relate. What would you say is at the top of mind for you for 2025? And that could be like in terms of, Fashion Africa now, personally, whatever you want to share, but like what are you looking at achieving in the next year? I mean, I guess we still have half of this year to go. So let's say for the rest of this year into the next year.
while for the rest, I mean, achieving really, I want to, how should I say it, have also some free time because I realize I'm working a lot.
Yes, that is
So
important.
self care. I want really to achieve personally self care and what I love to say, soft life. So somehow calm down and just, you know, self care, taking care of myself, just hanging with girls, you know, just being me, myself, and I somehow. Work wise, yeah, there are some corporations, I will not mention too much, but I want this to level up, absolutely to level up. So, yeah, there's a corporation in the pipeline. So I'm looking forward, hoping this will come to life finally. And that will be another great achievement. And it will be stunning. Where I'm like, okay,
Okay. Well, I will be looking out for it. Well, my last question, and just reflecting on your journey so far, you said you've been doing this for the past 14 years. Do you feel like you succeeded in your mission to like break stereotypes, change the narrative, and just bring more awareness to the African fashion industry?
I think I think I would, by being the one doing it. First of all, being here, creating a creative agency, working as a creative consultant, connecting companies, being the one who created, consulted, curated an exhibition where one of the designers were also now bought and is part of the collection. Um, Supporting brands, bringing brands to Germany who have been winning awards, who are now internationally known, like South African designer Max Hosa, who also launched his store recently in New York. Yeah,
I saw
like
that.
showcasing these brands back then. I think, in a way, yes, by really tapping into spaces where we haven't been, by founding a fashion B2B back then in frame of Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week and with partners like L'Oreal, Maybelline. So there has been success, I would say. And the fact, really, being a woman, being a black woman in a dominantly white space, being marginalized
Mhm.
here and still being visible, relevant, being a lecturer today, I think, yeah, it has been a journey. Absolutely. Here in Germany, I have written fashion history. So,
No, that is great. I mean, I definitely think that you have succeeded and are continuing to succeed every day with all of the strides that you're making in the industry. It's because of people like you that like we can see, fashion moving forward in the right direction in terms of like inclusion and diversity. And of course, like seeing, African designers all across the continent, on the map and them having more and more opportunities to just have access to a greater audience. So, thank you for the work that you're doing. If no one has told you, you're doing a great job. And it's amazing. And I know that I appreciate it as a fellow fashion professional. And I'm just excited that I'm able to share your work with my audience. So please share anything that you have coming up that you would like us to support. We want to follow you everywhere. We want to support Fashion Africa Now everywhere and want to make sure that we're tapped in with everything so that we can keep the movement
absolutely. I
going.
mean, for some who might travel to Germany, who might be here in July, 2nd of July, or you know. However, when you're here, reach out. Whoever's traveling to Germany, reach out to Fashion Africa Now. We are around, and let's see what we can do together, how we can really uplift each other's networks. This is what I can say. Let's stay connected. Let's really create a higher buzz around this narratives. And I'm happy to, yeah, support you as well.
Thank you. And where can the people find you on social
On
media?
social media, Instagram, we have our Fashion Africa Now account. We are on Facebook, but not that. That's not the current platform. Then, of course,
Not as much.
on
Yeah.
our website, fashionafricanow.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm now more into LinkedIn. And then we have also a podcast. I mean, I use it actually as a knowledge production. So wherever you can find podcasts, there we are, Fashion Africa Now podcast. Interesting conversations, and yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Beatrice, for talking to us. Yeah, I'm just very excited about everything that you all have coming up. I hope to be in Germany
Yeah,
sometime in my life.
you
so
should. Oh, we should
so I'm definitely making sure that we reach out and that I reach out and connect. But it's on my list of places. I want to
try
go
to. Or
everywhere.
otherwise, if you're planning to go to an African country, tell me about it. Yes,
Oh, okay,
yes,
yes,
yes.
that for sure.
Because who knows? We might be there at the same time, but otherwise, I'm glad to just, let you.
That honestly, that is
Yes.
probably more
Yes. So
likely.
let's
Is
do that. Absolutely. Either you come to Uganda or Senegal, however. But I think, yeah, this could be something what can evolve. If some more want to travel, let's do it.
Yeah, this we might, mess around and like make
You
a
know?
trip. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
And that's it, guys. Make sure you check the show notes for a direct link to all of the resources that I used for today's episode. If you love today's episode or any episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple. It takes you all of 2 seconds, but it really, really counts towards helping this show reach more people and more Black fashion enthusiasts like you. And if you haven't done so already, follow us on all social media at Black Fashion History Podcast so you can keep up with all things Black fashion history. And the most important thing, if you do nothing else, come back next week and join me for another riveting installment of Black Fashion History.